Okay, guys, you all ready? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to reconvene at this point and move to the next item, which is a Bayview presentation. This background on this is that several years ago we created a district called R1F. R1F was a residential zoning district on Hickory Island, specifically on the Hickory Island Company property, where we discovered as a result of multiple variance requests that our particular zoning ordinance did not match the compatibility of what was actually there, forcing residents to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for most anything. The Planning Commission addressed that. We changed the zoning ordinances. We created a district which was in fact compatible with the lots that were there, and solved the problem, which is a good thing. The question was raised subsequent to that about the opposite side, the Bayview side of Hickory Island, that in fact there are residents there, regions of that, which are in fact similar to what's on the Hickory Island Company property. And should we take a look at potentially revising the zoning conditions, which are currently R1B single-family residential, to something, to basically changing it to R1F. But a lot of ramifications for that, and so we asked Brian Borden to investigate. He prepared a preliminary presentation, or gave a preliminary review, I think at our last meeting, June, and that generated a lot of questions from this commission. And so we sent Brian off again to do another review with, looking at addressing the Planning Commission issues, and he's back tonight with facts for us. So, Brian, you have a presentation?
I do.
This is not an issue that we'll be voting on or anything tonight. It's trying to develop a path forward, if there is one.
So some of this will be a bit redundant, but I think it's important for you to see what we've done. Just a quick reminder, what we presented, I believe it was in June. Was there? I said I'd keep this brief too, and here I go. So there are 29 residences on the waterfront side of Bayview. There are also internal lots, or interior lots. There are lots that are on the opposite side of Bayview, the east side of Bayview, that are not waterfront lots. So I do think that's an important distinction that we make the more we present and discuss this in the open. That we make the distinction that we're only focusing on those waterfront properties. Application of different standards. I think the waterfront properties have a much different characteristic than do the interior. Make sure that that's clear up front. So what we did previously was compared all those 29 lots with current R1B standards, which is how they're currently zoned. We found obviously a number of non-conforming situations, predominantly tied to street front detached accessory buildings, lot width, lot area, and the coverage ratios, the floor area. I've not had the ability to study it yet because we don't have good enough photos, but I believe that we would probably find that there are some side yard setback issues as well, and potentially some building spacing. So R1B has a 6-foot minimum one side yard, a combination minimum of 18 feet, and a separation between principal buildings of 18 feet. I know there are instances from past reviews where those for my GIS guys, start pulling files through community development, open up the individual site plans, try to come to a little bit better conclusion on that. But that's a down the road step. So to get through tonight, what we did was looked at what happens to these conditions if we simply were to apply R1F standards to these 29 parcels. So the first slide is the lot width standard is what we want to focus on, is this column right here. So there are 26 of the 29 do not currently meet R1B lot width. If we were to apply the 40-foot lot width standard in R1F, that reduces to 7. So that's a pretty big reduction. If we were to apply the lot area standard, there are currently 21 non-conforming for R1B lot area. R1F, 10,000 square foot minimum lot size, would reduce that to 9. So Not maybe not quite as much as lot width, but pretty significant reduction there as well. And then were we to apply the R1F floor area and lot coverage ratios, both of which are maximum 25% as opposed to the currently allowed 22 and 20. You can see in floor area, not a huge reduction, 13 currently non-conforming. We would reduce that to 9. But in lot coverage, we see quite an improvement there. Currently 12 of the 29 non-conforming at the 20% limit. We bumped that up to 25, and we're down to 1 that's no longer compliant. So a handful of pretty decent improvements to just simply apply that existing zoning. I think there's enough there that I don't feel the need to create yet another zoning district. That was my concern, was that I was going to see that R1F didn't help much, and then we were going to have to create yet another district, which with the Hickory Island side, the East River side, that was really our only option. We did not have anything existing that would fit reducing the standards of R1B to a point that we increased the conformity of that particular area was kind of lowering the bar a little too much. If we were to allow 40-foot lots and 10,000 square foot lots all over R1B, we would have a tremendous density increase. And I don't believe that was ever the intent of the original study. So I wanted to make sure that it was at least a semi-decent fit. So here's just a quick summary of the table. So basically 26 down to 7 on lot width, 21 down to 9 on area, 13 to 9 floor area ratio, 12 to 1 lot coverage ratio. I think those are significant enough improvements that that R1F is probably a pretty good fit here. Let me reiterate one point that I've always said from the Hickory Island study to the Bayview study is that we'll never have standards that will get this to a point that we have full compliance. In other words, we're not going to be able to get these down to 0. In order to do that, I'll spare you having to hurt your eyes looking at these tables, but we would essentially have to take this down to the smallest lot. So we'd have to set the new lot width standard at 31 feet to make all of those apply. We'd have to set the lot area down to 8,200 to gain full compliance. Really, again, has the potential to start to alter the neighborhood if we go too low. So I don't really think that that's the intent in this situation either. There are a couple of R1F standards that are pretty specific and precise to the East River side. So I do point in my second point here that if we were to pursue this, there are a few things we'd have to do to sort of tweak those requirements, and I think we could do it with some additional footnotes. And what I think we could do is make some distinctions between waterfront lots on Bayview versus waterfront lots on East River, and then have a few varying requirements. So the detached accessory building standards would be one. We do allow street front detached on the East River side in the R1F district. But the standards are such that I believe we basically are trying to push them right up to the road. That's not necessarily a condition that's replicated on Bayview. There are a number of them in the front yard, but they're not as close. I know you've all traveled through there. When you travel the East River side, those garages are, 3, 5, 10 feet off the actual street frontage. When you go to the Bayview side, they're quite a bit is relative, but they're a little bit more front setback. So I'm not sure that's a perfect fit. And then those of you that were with us through that first study will recall that how we calculate the average shoreline setback on the East River side is very precise to Hickory Island. It's either a measurement from the street back or a minimum number, and that was per their, I believe it was maybe the association restrictions or requirements. So that would be another thing that would not be a good fit for the Bayview side, because it just won't make any sense. And those properties are not quite as deep on the Bayview side, such that if we're to say you have a 200-foot setback somewhere, it's just not going to replicate well. So obviously there'd be a little more work to do, but I do think in general R1F could be a good fit with a few tweaks, and that was kind of my suggestion. So where I wanted to leave this was if you guys want to continue down this path, I think it would probably be worthwhile for us to get the ordinance subcommittee together, have a smaller group. We can really kind of crunch the numbers, look at all of the ordinances impacted, because now this goes beyond just Article 3. It dips into Article 19 for detached accessory buildings, may dip into another section of Article 19. In the East River side, we have some pretty strong limitations on yard projections, especially like overhanging eaves or any other type of kind of architectural type features. Want to see if those still fit if we were to apply R1F to the Bayview side. So there's still a little bit of work to be done, but I do think that we're making good progress. And again, like I said, with the sort of a simplistic model, I think R1F could be a good fit, but I want to make sure it's anytime we start changing ordinances, it's those unintended consequences. You guys have heard me say that before. We talk about that a lot with our subcommittee. Want to make sure we're not overlooking something, missing something, setting the stage for a development to occur that is outside of the character of the neighborhood. Because the intent really is to try to devise some regulations that's more compatible and consistent with how this area is developed. That's where I'll leave it for tonight, Mr. Chair. Certainly happy to take any questions. Again, I think if you guys are on board, be happy to move forward. Ordinance subcommittee may have some other matters to discuss anyway. We haven't met in quite a while, so I'm certainly not opposed to trying to bring a little bit more information to that. Full look at all of the impacted sections.
Okay, well, the subcommittee, by the way, is Jim Davis and Jay and me. That's the group that kind of processes ordinances with Brian. So let's run around the table and see what you all think about the information you see. Should we proceed? Do we want the subcommittee to work on this? Hear your thoughts, please. Steve?
So definitely from the graphs and charts that you had presented, I think it definitely is a solution that works. I think it's a proactive way to try to address things that may come up in the future. Unfortunately, it's not as if we have 15, 20 applicants running to us right now for an issue. But I think it's a very proactive way to get something done by Christmas.
Okay. By Christmas? Wait a minute.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Can I interrupt real quickly? Yeah. Well, I won't speak to the by Christmas part. I completely overlooked really what I thought was another important part. It was the very last statement of my presentation on this was if we were going to move this forward and work with the subcommittee and start to refine and identify, once we've fully identified all of the impacts to the ordinance, then I think we're in a position where, again, if we want to pursue this, that we would want to do some type of a public outreach component as well. So I want to make sure I didn't overlook that. I completely glossed over it, but I do think that was an important part of the East Riverside study, and I really think it's important here as well for a number of reasons. We want to make sure that they're understanding. We want to make sure that they're generally okay. We want to make sure they know what we're trying to do. The last thing I want is for 29 residents to get a notice in the mail that we're rezoning their property and they've not been notified, contacted, or had any form of discussion about this. I don't want to do that to me, Lori, or any of you. Certainly not to Dale or any of the administration either.
Well, I think that obviously is clearly important. The subcommittee, assuming that the subcommittee is going to work on this, we would work the details, kind of refine it, bring it back to this commission, see if this commission thinks the ideas are good or bad, okay, and then once there's a consensus on the planning commission, then reach out informally to these people before we begin the formal review process. Because we want to get input before we make a final proposal. So I think your point is well taken, Brian, and we'd make sure that that was the case.
Thanks.
We can lay out that strategy as part of the Planning Commission direction. Jay.
Yeah, I do think it makes sense for us to proceed with the data that you've pulled together and a couple of other things. I do, if you could just remind us what the impact would be. I think it's good to remind ourselves and anybody else who's. What does this do to somebody who's currently in a non-conforming position who becomes conforming, and somebody who's in a non-conforming position who remains non-conforming?
Well, the latter is the easy one. Is there's no change, save for we potentially improve their situation. We may not eliminate the nonconformity, but if we improve their nonconforming situation in certain circumstances, that could be beneficial. But for the ones who are currently nonconforming and become conforming, it puts them in a position to allow for a much greater flexibility on rehabilitation, expansions. Whether they want to, remodel their home, expand their home, add a second floor to their home, whatever the case might be, takes them from a position of likely needing a variance to do so to being in a position where it would be a by right improvement that they would.
And then somebody who's currently in a non-conforming position, for example, I think of accessory structures, does not have a street front accessory structure. If we were to allow this, they would then obviously be.
They would have the opportunity, right, in compliance with whatever that new regulation might be. But yes, that would give them the opportunity, similar to kind of the rest of the neighborhood.
I do think it makes sense for us to work this.
Brian, your thoughts, please.
Just echo my colleagues' comments and say that I do think it's a good idea to be take to the subcommittee and find out if there's any unintended.
Dan.
I think Brian's comparison definitely showed that R-1B is not a good fit as it stands right now. The point of the zoning district is to keep the different case homes similar, and I was thinking enforcing it would have the opposite effect. Is the R1F the solution? I guess I'm not really sure of that. I don't have a good understanding of it, but I definitely agree that it's something that needs to be looked at.
Okay, well, good. Thank you, Dan. Well, by consensus, we're going to proceed. So, Jay, you and I and Jim will have to set up a time with Brian. And Brian, I don't know how long it'll take you to get ready for us to meet, because you usually do a lot of prep work for us.
We can we'll talk soon. But
Okay.
I don't
We'll
expect
talk offline.
I don't expect to need a ton of additional time into
Okay.
this.
We'll meet by Christmas.
We can meet, the subcommittee can meet by Christmas.
Never said which year.
Whether we'll be ready to come back to the planning commission or not is a.
This was your
Right,
chance
Brian.
to assign everything to Jim. He's here.
That's a great point.
I can Skype in from Florida over the holidays if you want. I mean,
All right, Brian, thank you for the presentation.
You're very welcome.
That is
Thank-
exactly what we wanted
Thank
to
you.
know. So much appreciated.
thanks.
Okay, let's move to the chair's report. And Brian, maybe you don't want to go sit down too much, because we have several things. I thought that a general review of the status of the applications that we've heard from prior would be beneficial, what's going on with them, and
So-
some issues.
I will take the last one first on my slide. I'm sorry, to make that clearer. So we had a long time ago, we had a pre-app conference with the gas station at the corner, proposed a number of site improvements, modifications to the building, to the parking lot. At the time it was presented to you, had the inclusion of a drive-through coffee shop as well. We did not hear from them for many months. Finally got some revised plans back from them attempting to address the comments of the first review letter as well as your comments. I prepared a second review letter, sent that back to the applicant in hopes that we would progress and move forward. That was in August. My hope was that they would have potentially either A, been ready to come back before you for consideration tonight, or that there were such significant changes that we would bring it back and kind of have a pre-app part two so that we could keep you all apprised. I've not heard back from them in the time since. So current update is I'm not really sure where that project status-wise. We thought it was dead for a while, and then it popped back up again, and then now we're pushing a couple months with no activity and no communication from the petitioner, or at least from the design team, not necessarily from the owner. My phone conversation with the project designer There was some confusion, I think, in that revised submittal. The revised submittal had removed the drive-through from the project, which a number of the concerns, both myself and the commission, were related to that drive-through. So I actually viewed that as a pretty big improvement. There were some confusions as to whether or not certainly wasn't going to come back and present you all with plans that removed a drive-through if in fact they still want to pursue the drive-through. So I think that's just another one. We'll do our best to, if we don't hear back in say another month or so, we'll reach out before year end to see if and when they're ready. We'll bring them back before you. If and when we have more administrative communication, we'll relay that to you guys as well. Another one that's not on my screen, but because we did do some travels down Macomb Street today for our previous case for a number of other items as well. The project that did obtain site plan approval earlier this year, was that this year? Inco.
Yeah.
Is moving. I'm sure you all have seen it, so I was happy to see that. Pretty good progress there. I did hear a couple comments. It looks meets the ordinance, so it's consistent with the plans that were approved. But I was glad to see some progress there. I think that's still going to, when finished, I think that will be a really, really nice. So there's that one. So then there's these other two here. So the first one, there's a building on Macomb Street on the north side, former office building. This may look somewhat familiar. There was a new owner earlier this year, and he had approached staff with some potential projects for reuse, remodel of this site. We had a number of discussions to the point where we had a process lined up for him to apply for site plan review. We were going to try to get him in front of you. While those plans did not proceed, the owner did go ahead and start removing the front of the building. While I think he had some plans in his mind, and again, really has kind of not done anything since. So the chairman kind of has re-raised this concern to myself and to staff. The condition of this building is really not in keeping with what we want to see on Macomb Street. Quite frankly, not what we want to see anywhere in the township. Residents in the middle of a neighborhood, I'm sure the neighbors would not want it. Been in this condition for the better part of a couple of months at this point. Yeah, I think I'll go that. So we have sort of reiterated, when this was first brought to my attention, I asked Lori to reach out to the owner and or building official to try to get some remedy. She did contact the owner. The owner did confirm that he was not pursuing that project as we had initially discussed, but it was sort of reiterated to him that we need to see a plan for what you're going to do to at least finish off this building. It does need to be refinished, whatever material it's going to be. It needs to be done, and it should just not be left in this condition. I have gone so far as to suggest that we also would like to see a timeline from him, because it's been so long in this condition, that we would like to see a time frame within which he plans to sort of have the plans drawn up, apply for permits. If there's a significant change, and it, quite frankly, it's on Macomb Street, and if there's a significant architectural change, there's the potential he may need site plan review. A number of factors to be considered, that we just want to make sure that the owner doesn't lose sight of this, and that we continue to sort of monitor any progress that he can make, kind of stay on top of the situation.
I would hope that we would be, rather than wishing for a timeline, requiring a timeline.
Absolutely.
You know, this has been at least 6 months, at least. And you know, hoping that he's going to do something is not the same as requiring him to do something. I mean, there are alternatives that the township has for derelict buildings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would
That's
hope-
what,
I would
that was
hope
my.
that-
I guess that was my intent, Mr. Chair. It wasn't necessarily, wishful thinking that we would get
Well,
it.
it's wishful
That's-
thinking has got us 0 so far. So it needs to be something besides that. And, whoever that needs to get relayed to, I think, it's in the best interest of the township to do something about this. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely. And then there are actually two.
It's going to be a health code issue down the road.
Sure.
Tested and then torn down, or who knows what. But to your point, if there's a code or if there is a ordinance or something, I don't understand why the township officials aren't taking stronger action against this. And I can't remember who the owner is, but go a few areas, lots to the west of that, we still have the issue where buildings were taken down there, and those lots look unacceptable. Nothing was done there either.
Add that to my list for discussion.
Island Shop, sir.
Yes, Island Shops is the last one. So we probably, the chairman and I had some conversations in terms of some procedural elements. So Island Shops, which is south side of Macomb, Hungry Howie's essentially, is the main primary visible tenant there. So they went before ZBA earlier this summer. They had a proposal to sort of eliminate the front yard greenbelt and install parking within that particular area. They've stated that there's a lack of convenient front yard parking for that site. A lot of people just want to pull right up to Hungry Howie's, obviously, and have parking, getting their pizza. That was denied. There was no finding of practical difficulty. There were a couple of variances that were at stake. Regardless, that was denied, so that project's not being pursued. What they have proposed in lieu of that project is to remove, there is on the building side of the parking lot, there are spaces, there are 4 or 5 spaces up there. There's also a small kind of oval-shaped landscape island. They would like to remove that island, which would then give them the width to incorporate, I believe, 2 more parking spaces. So they add a little bit to it. So we're currently working with that owner to sort of work through that process. As part of that, we've identified a number of site conditions that need to be improved, brought up to township standards as part of this. So in other words, basically, we're going to allow them to remove that island and put in 2 new parking spaces. We want to see some additional site improvements. So there's some other issues here. There's some more photos. The parking lot condition in general is relatively poor in spots. We did drive back there. I would not say that it's the entire parking lot needs to be ripped up. Certainly, you see holes like this, they need to have some repair work. It's my understanding that that's going to be part of the request. The rear lot, any of you that have been back there, the paint stripes have completely worn away over time. So we've also indicated that they're going to need to restripe that rear parking lot. And then the condition of their existing dumpster. This photo, you can see some debris that's spilled around, in large part because the lid is not closed, nor are the gates. Per your ordinance, those are required to be closed when not in use. So we're also working with them to get this cleaned up as one step, and then the second step is for the owner to really get their tenants to understand how to use the waste receptacle and to make sure that it's maintained in a proper condition moving forward. There are residences right behind this sort of the masonry wall and the tree hedge here. There are residences right back there. So potential for debris to get picked up and blow into this residential. Certainly not something, we don't want to see it blowing around anywhere, quite frankly, but the fact that people live right behind here sort of adds to it. I will add, ironically, I wish I had taken a photo when I was there today. There is actually, you can see the back side of this sign on the gate. There's actually a sign on the gate that says, "Keep lids closed and gate closed at all times," or something, not a direct quote, but I thought that was pretty funny. So anyway, it's there. There is some direction there. I will tell you that the gates were closed when I was by there today, but the lid was not. So the lid was. Both of them are kind of important maintenance standards for this site, and again for the protection of the residences to the. That's going to be one. Again, they've been very responsive. Let me say that too. I don't want to be on television bashing them because that's not my intent here. They have been very responsive. Everything we've asked them to do with all the different properties they own in the township and manage, they have done an excellent job. They've been very easy to work with. They've been made aware of these issues, and I have no doubts in my mind that they'll execute and bring the site to mitigate all of the concerns that we've brought up.
Very good, thank you. Any questions or comments from Brian on that? Let's hit the next meeting date, Brian, based on where things are at. I have extended public comment.
I gotta go back to my calendar now. We don't have anything pending, so the reality is I believe, the open-ended items from tonight, be it again, if we get an update from the gas station, bring that to your attention. If we can get the subcommittee to meet, progress on Bayview, and obviously the Macomb Street plan we had pre-app for tonight, if that progresses at all, those would be the big items that we would need another. None of those come to fruition in the future. I don't have anything pressing really that.
Okay, then on that basis, why don't we set tentatively like a meeting first Monday in December, be before the holidays. If something pops up, and we make great progress on the zoning ordinance or whatever, we can discuss that. Applicants comes in. If in fact neither of those things happen, we refer it out to January meeting. Right.
So December is the 5th.
December 5?
Yep, that's the first Monday. January, the first Monday is the 2nd. Third Monday is the 16th, but that's Martin Luther King Day. I believe the township is closed that day. There are 5 Mondays in January, so conceivably the 30th would be the 5th Monday. That's usually been an option for us in
okay. Let's do this, guys. How does December 5th tentatively? And we will get together on January 30th, to kick off the year. Good, guys? Okay, let's go to extended public comment. Hello.
Hi,
Thanks for your patience.
no problem.
Would you give us your name and your address, please?
Ichia Schmemann, Boyd Avenue. Out distribute.
Yes, if you have something for us. What is this concerning? Brian, can you help her get started there? Would you spell your last name for us, please? Again, please.
Schmemann, Schmeaman. Roseville Presbyterian Church requests an addition to the Township Ordinance of Sign Regulations, Article 16, Section 16.6C. We seek to add under signs for churches, schools, and other institutional uses, Article number 5. Under signs for churches, schools, and other institutional uses, we're asking addition of Article 5. The sign may contain an electronic board with changeable static messages. The electronic display shall not flash, pulse, or scroll. The sign, including the message board, shall not exceed 48 square feet. Some background. We at Grosse-Ile Presbyterian have been researching ways to communicate our special programs of interest to the full community. Churches have used changeable letter boards, portable billboards, banners, and even lawn signs. These are labor-intensive, time-consuming, winter weather-dependent, and sometimes illegible. Signs in front of St. Thomas Lutheran. We propose to install an electronic message board that changes periodically and communicates our secular and non-secular offerings. This attachment shows a sample of recurring programs offered by Grosse-Ile Presbyterian. I'm not going to go through all of it. First couple. Movie lovers, join us for Friday Flicks, Bridge of Spies on June 3rd at 2 p.m. Come for free movie and popcorn. Next one, game lovers, gather every Wednesday. Come for dominoes, euchre, canasta, mahjong, or puzzles and fellowship. Bring your friends. My husband is not a movie guy, and he's not a game guy. And, these are the places I go to for my fix of movies and games. I do bridge, but at the canasta table next to us, there's Mexican train, and when somebody wins, the music starts to play, and everybody's just a great time. And there's just so many programs, and we do this. This is all the recurring programs that we have all the time. Attachment 3. Interfaith-based programs offered by us. We bring in theologians, renowned theologians, Dr. Amy Jill Levine. Her topic was Hear the Parables Through Jewish Ears. And we have Friends of the Groom. It's an international Christian theater group, performs messages from the Bible. Just fun stuff. Has Jesus lived? We brought in a historian, Dr. Paul Mayer, brings Bible passages supported by archaeology digs. I'm a science and technology person, and I was just flabbergasted. There are actual digs and facts that supported that Jesus had lived, and just stuff like this. We wanted to share. Secular programs that's offered by Grosse-Ile Presbyterian. Alexander Zonick Holiday Concert, internationally renowned flautist, performs on December 17th. All are welcome to this free event. The last 2 years when I sat in this, I was just thinking about the 28 flautists between the high school and middle school band. How wonderful it would be for these kids to sit in a concert like this. They would be so inspired. Alexander is funny, and he plays all different kinds of music, and it was just very inspiring. And we do things like memorial services that we like to make people aware of. Since we no longer have a paper, our memorial services are just totally down from attendance. And I hear people talk about they didn't know so-and-so died, and they really wish that they had the opportunity to be part of the memorial service. Finding Hope is join the 10-week grief support group for conversation, support, and comfort, facilitated by subject expert Sue Hurst. To me, the electronic signs are all about connections and all about community. Dietrich Bonhoeffer wrote, "The church is the church only when it exists for others." At Grosio Presbyterian, we strive to do just that. We demonstrate the good news in word and action by the services and programs we offer to the community. The proposed electronic message board is a programmable LED display system. The built-in sensors allow manual and/or automatic dimming of brightness. Automatic shut-off after hours is also featured. The recommended size for an electronic static signboard to convey succinct message is 4x8 or 32 square feet. We request an additional 16 square feet of area to identify the church for a total area of 48 square feet. Sign. Currently, the sign is 32 square feet, so we're asking for additional 16 square feet to make it a total of 48 square feet. The entire district would benefit from the new sign ordinance by the simple, welcoming nature of the signs and the plethora of information and offerings to the residents. The transparency and openness would help attract new families to the island. I guess what I'm trying to say is, we're not talking Las Vegas. We just want to communicate to the island people. The City of Riverview has one, and Allen Park High School, Gabriel Richard Catholic High School, and Cabrini High School. Pretty much, all the communities around here have standards for electronic signs. I wish the board would consider looking into this.
Thank you for your presentation. First question, was this something that was approved by the elders and actually is a formal request by the Presbyterian Church for an ordinance change?
No, I had not gone to the elders. I have talked to the pastor, and I have talked to the communications group, and a lot of the elders are aware of this, what's happening.
Okay, but you can't say it's from the Presbyterian Church, because I am in the Presbyterian Church, and I would have to. I'm neither an elder nor a deacon. At this point, I'm simply a member.
Well,
so as long as everybody's okay with that. Conflict?
I do not.
Presbyterian Church, so.
Okay. But at this point in time, this is not a request from the Presbyterian Church. This is a request from you.
I'm an elder from the Presbyterian Church. Once you're elder, you're always an elder. And when I became an elder, I was told that you do things on your conscience. And I have contacted enough people, people from the outreach committee and the communication committee to make this something we would like to go forward with. Because we're all about community, and this is, without the paper, we have no way of communicating.
Okay, thank you. Brian, procedurally, if this is a formal request for a zoning ordinance change, how is that done in the ordinance? Article, I forget.
Well, we would typically, ordinance amendments are not initiated by the public. They're typically initiated by the township board or the planning commission. So I think the reality here is that, and I'll have to double check the ordinance. I've occasionally seen an application form for a resident, landowner, occupant to petition for a text amendment, but I don't believe that's in your ordinance, but I'll check. I think the reality would be is if amending the ordinance to allow for electronic changeable message signs is something the commission is interested in looking at, then we can certainly do so. We referenced earlier tonight that we anticipate probably having an ordinance subcommittee meeting. We could add that discussion at that point, but really I think at this point the direction to do that or not is up to the full commission, at least the
I see a couple of issues here. I see a sign variance, basically for size.
Oh, I mean,
Sign is double or triple, double, 2.5 times.
150.
It's 32.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's
And-
150%.
And that is the zoning board of appeals issue, isn't it?
Well, maybe we'll take one step back. So we've met several times to talk about this particular project. She met with Lori, she met with me, she met with Dale. She was directed to the township board to make her presentation to pitch for an ordinance change. The township board referred her to the planning commission in terms of an ordinance change. So what I want to make clear here is there's two distinct things. There would be changing the ordinance, which is one thing. There would be the Presbyterian Church pursuing this sign, which would require multiple variances via the zoning board of appeals. That would be a separate process. That was explained when we met. We gave her essentially those options. We said that's the ordinance prohibits them currently. You can either apply for a variance and go to ZBA, or you can talk to the powers that be.
Did they go to zoning board of appeals?
He did not.
Why not?
I was told by Brian Loftus to come here to the planning commission.
Let me just understand. So, even though adding number 5, if we went down that path as a recommendation and looked at this in the future, items 2, I guess item 2 would still trigger a zoning board of appeals, the square footage, because that's not what's being changed in number 5.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm on the same
Trying to
page.
understand what
Yep.
is applying.
Maybe I can jump in again too. I would again. There's a couple of ways to look at this as well. My thought process right now is that if the planning commission is interested in looking at an ordinance amendment for this, that we would work with the subcommittee to draft such an ordinance amendment. I would not necessarily, and this is obviously no offense. She's done a lot of research, but I don't know how many ordinances she's ever written, and this is not what I would suggest if you were to amend the ordinance. There are a lot more elements we need to cover if we're going to open up the door for this draft in particular. That would be one thing. If you wanted to consider that, that's not necessarily the direction that I would want you to go, because it leaves open far too many other aspects of these types of signs that are not fully regulated by the one sentence, that's 2 sentences that are proposed to be.
Okay, so basically to summarize, first of all, this is not a Presbyterian Church request. This is your request. You're standing in front of us. Secondly, you've been around to the township. You've been to the township board, and you've chosen not to go to ZBA, but to come here to have an ordinance change.
No, I was told by the board to come here to the planning commission.
Okay, so the board told you to come here. All
Yes.
right, now I understand. So the issue in front of us is not really about the area of the sign or any of that stuff. It's basically the one element, which is anybody interested in changing the zoning ordinance reflect electronic signs? Brian, you and I, well, we were involved in that when signs were banned.
Well, I think it's the like most communities that have a hard time whether to allow these or not. It's their proliferation that creates concerns. When one site after another, it's one thing to have one or two of them spread out through a community. It's quite another to have every single property owner. For instance, up and down Macomb Street, if every business were permitted to have one, you start to have some potential effects, be it traffic or otherwise. And that's why, there's a number of things that you can put in place in terms of the brightness, the color schemes, prohibitions on, scrolling, blinking, flashing, etc. I have some communities that go so far as to limit one message per day. So the rotation of the message is static, such that you wouldn't actually see it change, but it would be a static message. There's a lot of different ways to try to address that, but that's, to get to your question, that was my understanding of what the township.
All right. Does anybody have any basic procedural questions? I'm interested in feedback. Dan, let's start with you.
You want me to get back to my seat, or?
You can stay there in case there are questions.
Okay.
I think this day and age, with how common electronic signs are now, I think it would be hard not to at least review it. We're not right away saying we need to add it. We should at least start by reviewing. And it would definitely be important to look at brightness, if it's flashing or not. But sometimes the electronic signs can be very subtle and basically be easy way for a business or organization to have a constant changing message boards for what subjects they want to get across. So it would be ideal for the township to look at this.
Okay, thank you. Brian.
I don't think it hurts to look at it, but I do have major concerns about electronic signs. There's many that I've come across that are frankly obnoxious, and putting them in residential areas could be a recipe for disaster. Not saying that anything about the particular ones that are being advocated for here. So that being said, it wouldn't harm to look at it, especially from the side of being a little bit more defensive on what might be coming down the pike.
Thank you. Jay.
Yeah, when we talked about this before, and it's been a few years last discussed it, I was very much against them, and it was really more about the fact that it's the slippery slope, and how do you put the right controls around this so you don't let things come through that are offensive and obnoxious. And I think if we do this, it's going to be all about. And one of the things was that I think at the time, a lot of these ordinances were somewhat new, and so we weren't sure how they were going to be enforced and how they're going to be interpreted by the courts and things like that as people challenged them. I think maybe enough time has gone by that it makes sense to take a look at it. And one of the things I'd be concerned about is always going to be the limits, and how do we put the right limits around it, whether it's one time a day or I think we talked about it could be one time an hour, it could be one time every 10 minutes, it could be adjust the lumens, adjust the time of day that it's allowed, all those sorts of things. I mean, there's a lot of detail that has to go into this to make sure that we don't end up with flashing lights, because these things are getting very inexpensive. That's part of what's going on here is, every company on Macomb Street basically could afford to put one of these in their yards now. And, we need to make sure that we don't have Vegas Strip going down Macomb Street, frankly, with multiple colors and flashing. And, you see they have pictures of, orange juice, on their sign at Walgreens and, that sort of thing. And obviously that's not what we would anywhere on our island, let alone getting to what those restrictions are. Obviously it gets us into micromanaging a lot of things we try to avoid if we can. And to the extent there are other communities that have had success with this, getting to the sorts of restrictions that we would be looking for. I'm not against them in concept. I'm against where they could go. I'm for looking at it, but I'd be interested to look to what other communities have done and what.
I guess I just do need a point of clarification before I give my opinion. I don't have the ordinance in front of me. Article 16, Section 16.6, if this is verbatim, signs for churches, schools, and other institutional uses. Is this different than businesses? I know we had a lot of discussion around gas station signs and Macomb Street signs. Is this different?
That section is, there are different regulations. However, if we are going to open up electronic changeable message signs, I think we would be hard pressed to try to restrict it to institutional use. I don't know that we can come up with a sound purpose and intent to keep it out of a non-residential property, a commercial office type space. We can certainly look into it, but I have run into concerns and issues in other communities where we try to segregate types of signs and say, for instance, church or a school, not at a grocery store.
So with that clarification, I do think it's worth the time to at least look at this, but I would be very hesitant to provide approval for something.
I concur with that. I am highly skeptical about these. I think they're undesirable basically in the community. Right now, when you say no, there is no slope. Whether we could be smart enough or even legal enough to be able to grant some portion of the island an opportunity that another portion does not have is uncertain to me. But we can look at it. I think, I kind of place this, and when I see all these nice signs, I place this in the context of a driver texting, not looking at the road, looking at their their phone, doing their text message, instead of watching what they're supposed to be watching, which is the road. And electronic signs to me are nothing more than a big text message. And I just have a very hard time with that. So the subcommittee can look at it, but I'm going to look at it personally, from my perspective, with a very hard look. Okay, so on that basis, we will look at it. So Jay, you and Jim and I will have a look at it. And at some point, when the committee feels we have something to share, we'll come back to the full group, and then you all can take a look at it, see what you think, and we'll go on from there. Thank you very much.
Just for your information, the Riverview has a pretty extensive ordinance on electronic signs, and they're pretty strict.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, anybody have any further questions or comments or concerns? Sure. Entertain a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much, guys. Productive meeting today. Good job.